Everyone said they were perfect together. 7 years. Thousands of photographs. Dozens of vacations. Matching smiles. Matching dreams. The kind of couple people repost online with captions like, "Real love still exists." And honestly, looked real. He treated her like she mattered. Every room they entered together felt lighter. Every family gathering turned into stories about when they would finally get married. So when the proposal finally happened, nobody was surprised. Not her parents. Not their friends. Not even the guests flying in from different states just to witness what looked like the beginning of a forever marriage. The wedding itself was beautiful. White flowers covered the ballroom. Soft piano music echoed through the hall. Guests cried during the vows. Even the groom struggled to hold back tears while looking at her. And standing beside him the entire time was his best man. Quiet. Calm. Watching everything. At first, nobody noticed anything strange. Not when the groom kept disappearing during the reception. Not when the bride's smile slowly started fading. Not when she suddenly left the ballroom holding his phone in her shaking hands. Because one message, one single message, would completely destroy everything she believed about the man she had just married. And less than 1 hour after saying, "I do," the music stopped. Guests turned in confusion. The bride walked toward the center of the ballroom with tears running down her face, grabbed the microphone, and publicly exposed a secret so devastating that police would eventually be called to the wedding before the night was over. But the most disturbing part wasn't the secret itself. It was how long the lie had been hiding in plain sight.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.
At first, guests thought she was overwhelmed with emotion. Nobody expected disaster. The bride stood in the center of the ballroom trying to steady her breathing while 200 people stared at her in silence. The groom slowly approached her, careful, nervous, like a man already afraid of what might happen next. Then she lifted his phone into the air, and suddenly, his face changed completely. Not confusion, fear. Real fear. That was the exact moment people realized this was no misunderstanding. This was exposure. The bride looked directly at him, her voice trembling. "You lied to me for 7 years." Gasps spread across the ballroom instantly. The groom whispered something under his breath nobody could hear. But the bride kept going. "I defended you. I trusted you. I built my future around you. And the entire time, you were building another life behind my back." The best man immediately looked away. Guests began turning toward him. Slowly at first, then all at once. The groom tried taking the microphone from her. She pulled it back before he could touch it. "Don't touch me." That sentence hit the room harder than screaming ever could. One bridesmaid covered her mouth in shock. The groom's mother sat frozen in her chair. Several guests quietly pulled out their phones and started recording. And then the bride revealed the part that shattered the room completely. She had found documents, private records, evidence that connected the groom and his best man in ways she never understood before. Not rumors, not assumptions, proof. And suddenly every strange moment from the last 7 years started making sense. The late-night disappearances, the hidden trips, the emotional distance, the secrets about money, the constant lies that never fully added up. The groom finally snapped. Not with anger, with desperation. "Please stop talking." But the bride was already beyond heartbreak. Now she wanted answers. Narrator. Imagine discovering the person you trusted most had been living a completely different reality behind your back for years. Would you walk away quietly? Or would you expose everything publicly? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading all of them. Because what happened next made the wedding even worse. Less than 30 minutes earlier, none of this existed. The bride had still been smiling for photographs, still hugging family members, still dancing with guests. She genuinely believed she had just married the love of her life. Then the groom disappeared again. At first she ignored it. He had already vanished twice during the reception, each time returning nervous, distracted, sweating. She assumed wedding pressure was getting to him. But then his phone lit up beside her chair. One message, from the best man. No emojis, no explanation, just one sentence. "After tonight, we never have to hide anymore." The bride stared at the screen for nearly 10 seconds trying to understand what she was reading. At first she thought it was business related. Then she noticed previous messages, deleted conversations, hidden notifications, strange financial screenshots. Her heartbeat started racing. Something suddenly felt wrong. Very wrong. She walked out of the ballroom holding the phone tightly in her hand while guests continued laughing behind her, completely unaware their perfect wedding was already collapsing. Inside a private hallway near the dressing rooms, she unlocked the phone, and what she found next destroyed her completely. Documents, photos, travel records, shared legal paperwork, years of hidden connections between the groom and the best man. The deeper she looked, the more impossible it became to deny. Sometimes betrayal doesn't happen in one moment. Sometimes it's hidden inside hundreds of tiny lies spread across years. And the scariest part? The victim usually realizes everything all at once. The bride collapsed onto the hallway floor crying silently while guests continued celebrating only a few rooms away. At that moment, she had two choices: leave quietly, or expose the truth in front of everyone. She chose the second option. And before the night ended, police would arrive at the wedding venue. Because the public exposure was only the beginning. 7 years earlier, their relationship looked like something out of a movie. They met at a charity event through mutual friends. She noticed him immediately. Confident, polite, well-spoken. The kind of man families trusted instantly. He made people feel comfortable within minutes of meeting him. And when he focused his attention on her, she felt chosen, special. Within weeks they were inseparable. Long drives at night, weekend trips, late phone calls that lasted until sunrise. He remembered small details about her nobody else noticed. Her favorite food, the songs she played when stressed, the way she became quiet whenever something bothered her. And every time she started falling deeper in love, he gave her even more reasons to trust him. That was what made the betrayal so devastating later. Because none of the relationship felt fake to her. Not the birthdays, not the holidays, not the moments she spent imagining their future together. To her, it was real. Months into the relationship, she met his closest friend for the first time. The man who would eventually become his best man at the wedding. At first, nothing felt strange. He was friendly, respectful, always around. The groom introduced him as the brother I never had. And honestly, that explanation made sense. They were constantly together. Business meetings, trips, family gatherings, late-night calls. The best man knew everything about him. Sometimes even things she didn't know yet. But whenever she questioned how close they seemed, the groom always had an answer ready. We've been through everything together. So she ignored the discomfort. Because when you love someone deeply, you often silence your own instincts just to protect the relationship. Years passed, and the relationship kept moving forward. Vacations became more expensive. Their social media looked perfect. Friends envied them openly. People constantly asked, "When are you finally getting married?" But behind the beautiful photographs, small cracks were already forming. The groom became emotionally distant without warning. Some weekends he disappeared completely, claiming business emergencies. Important conversations about their future kept getting delayed. And every time she tried discussing marriage seriously, he somehow redirected the conversation. She stayed. Because 7 years is a long time to emotionally invest in someone. Especially someone you believe is building a future with you. Have you ever ignored a red flag because you loved someone too much to believe they could hurt you? Be honest in the comments. Sometimes the warning signs are there early, but emotions make people explain them away. And in this story, those warning signs were about to become impossible to ignore. Because months before the wedding, the bride would discover something strange that nearly made her cancel everything. But she made one mistake. She trusted his explanation. About 8 months before the wedding, things started changing faster. The groom suddenly became obsessed with keeping up appearances. He pushed harder for a public wedding, a bigger venue, more guests, more family involvement. At first, she thought he was simply excited to finally get married. But looking back later, she realized something else was happening. He wasn't focused on building a marriage. He was focused on creating an image. And the more attention the wedding received, the more nervous he became behind closed doors. He started sleeping less, checking his phone constantly, leaving rooms to answer calls in private. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night and find him sitting alone in the dark staring at his screen. When she asked what was wrong, he always smiled and blamed stress. But the stress never disappeared. It only grew worse. Then one afternoon, she accidentally discovered the first real crack in his story. It happened while searching for a tax document inside his office drawer. Instead, she found travel records, multiple hotel reservations, trips he claimed were business-related. But the strange part wasn't the trips themselves. It was the name attached to nearly all of them. The best man. At first she laughed it off. They were business partners. Close friends. Always together anyway. Something about it stayed in her mind. A few days later she confronted him carefully. Not accusing. Not angry. Just confused. The groom immediately became defensive. Too defensive. He started talking faster. Explaining details she never even asked about. And then he said something that bothered her for weeks afterward. You're overthinking things again. Again. That word stayed with her. Because suddenly she realized how many times he had used it over the years whenever she questioned something uncomfortable. Manipulation rarely starts with huge lies. Sometimes it starts by making someone doubt their own instincts. And little by little, the victim stops trusting themselves completely. The bride wanted to believe him. So she apologized. Even though deep down, something no longer felt right. Weeks later, another strange moment happened during a family dinner. One of the groom's relatives made an awkward joke about how close he and the best man were. The entire table went silent immediately afterward. Nobody laughed. Nobody continued the conversation. The groom changed the subject almost instantly. But the bride noticed something important. Several people at that table avoided eye contact with her afterward. As if they knew something she didn't. That feeling haunted her for months. And the closer the wedding got, the more isolated she started feeling inside the relationship. The groom became colder emotionally. Intimacy almost disappeared completely. Every difficult conversation turned into an argument. He kept pushing the wedding forward. Faster. Bigger. More public. Now the bride had questions she could no longer silence. Why did he seem emotionally disconnected from the marriage itself? Why was the best man involved in nearly every private decision? And why did it feel like everyone around her knew something they were too afraid to say out loud? But despite all the warning signs, she still walked down that aisle. Because after 7 years, walking away felt impossible. And unfortunately, that decision was about to destroy her publicly in front of everyone she loved. The bride stood in the middle of the ballroom trying not to break apart completely while hundreds of eyes remained locked on her. Nobody was eating anymore. Nobody was dancing anymore. The wedding had stopped breathing. The groom kept begging her quietly to put the microphone down before things became worse. But for her, there was no worse left. The worst thing had already happened. She had just discovered the man she spent 7 years loving had been hiding an entire reality behind her back while preparing to marry her publicly. And now she wanted answers in front of everyone. The bride looked directly at the best man. For the first time all night, he looked nervous, not uncomfortable, terrified. His hands were shaking. His face had lost all color. And every guest in that ballroom noticed it immediately. The silence became unbearable. Then the bride finally said the sentence that shattered both families completely. How many people here already knew? Nobody answered. But several people looked down instantly. And that reaction hurt her more than the lies themselves. Because suddenly, the betrayal felt bigger than just one person. Now she felt humiliated by an entire circle of silence. The groom's father stood up trying to calm the situation before more damage happened publicly. But the bride interrupted him immediately. She was done protecting everyone. Done protecting reputations. Done protecting appearances. Done pretending everything was normal. Years of confusion and emotional exhaustion were pouring out all at once. She started revealing everything she discovered on the phone. The hidden trips. The secret financial records. The legal documents connecting the groom and the best man. The private messages discussing life after the wedding. Guests started whispering louder now. Some looked shocked. Others looked like they were hearing something they already suspected for years. And that was the moment the groom finally lost control emotionally. He started crying. Not soft emotional tears from earlier during the vows. This was panic. Real panic. Because the carefully controlled image he spent years building was collapsing publicly in front of family, friends, co-workers, and business partners all at once. The bride stared at him through tears. And instead of screaming, she asked him one final question. Did you ever actually love me? Or was I just part of the cover? The groom couldn't answer. And his silence gave her the answer anyway. Sometimes silence tells the truth louder than words ever can. The ballroom exploded into arguments seconds later. Family members started shouting at each other across tables. One bridesmaid ran outside crying. Guests rushed toward exits while others stayed just to watch the chaos unfold. And then the situation became physical. One of the bride's cousins confronted the best man near the entrance after accusing him of helping destroy her life for years. Security rushed in immediately before the fight escalated further. Chairs were knocked over. Glasses shattered on the floor. People screamed over each other trying to understand what was real and what wasn't. Then someone finally called the police. Within minutes, officers entered the wedding venue while guests recorded everything on their phones. The bride sat alone near the center of the ballroom, still wearing her wedding dress while absolute chaos surrounded her from every direction. The makeup artist who helped prepare her that morning was now helping her stop crying. That image stayed with people afterward more than anything else. Not the screaming, not the police, not the scandal, but the sight of a bride sitting completely shattered less than 1 hour after saying, "I do." Imagine giving someone your best years, only to realize they were building a completely different future behind your back the entire time. Would you ever forgive that kind of betrayal? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading every single one, because the most devastating part of this story still hadn't happened yet. The wedding was already destroyed. But after police separated everyone and guests finally started leaving the venue, the bride would learn one final truth that made the entire nightmare even darker. A truth that proved this deception had been planned far longer than she ever imagined. By midnight, the ballroom was almost empty. The flowers were still beautiful. The candles were still glowing. Half-finished meals still covered the tables. But the wedding itself was dead. Police officers remained near the entrance taking statements from family members while exhausted guests slowly left the venue in silence. Nobody knew what to say anymore. Just hours earlier, they had arrived expecting a celebration. Now they were leaving after witnessing a public collapse nobody would ever forget. The groom had disappeared into a private room with several relatives. The best man had already been escorted out through a back exit to avoid another confrontation. And the bride sat completely alone, still wearing her wedding dress, still holding the phone that destroyed her entire future. At some point during the chaos, one older woman quietly approached her table, a relative from the groom's side of the family. The woman looked devastated, like someone carrying guilt for a very long time. She sat beside the bride carefully before saying something that changed everything again. "You deserved to know years ago." The bride slowly looked up at her, confused, broken. Then the woman admitted the truth. Several people inside the family had suspected for years that the relationship was never what it appeared to be. Nobody knew every detail.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.